If you think you've heard it all about writing, plot structure, character arcs, and the usual show don't tell, then this video is for you, because today I'm going to talk about everything that you probably don't know about writing. These are behind the scenes insights, hidden truths, and unconventional tips that most writing advice glosses over, forgets about, or maybe they don't even pick up on. By the end of this video, the takeaway I promise is that you will have a whole new perspective on how to write amazing stories. We often think of writing as this sitting down, opening up a blank document, tap away at a keyboard until you've got a novel. But there's so much more that happens before your fingers ever even touch the key. I want to talk about the mental marathon, because writing is a mental process, so much more, of course, than it is a physical one. You're juggling ideas, characters, motivations, themes, plot twists that you're thinking about in the future, and you're keeping this all in your head. So the mental load really can be exhausting. And a lot of people will tell you just write, but sometimes you actually need to step away from the keyboard. You need to think, you need to daydream, and you need to let your subconscious connect the dots with all these ideas you have going on in your head. One of the things that gets overlooked a lot is research, which takes a huge amount of time. This is the case even for fiction. So you'd be astounded at the amount of hours writers will spend fact-checking small details, learning about different cultures, or verifying historical events. And it is of paramount importance if you want your writing to be taken seriously. So often it's not just about writing about detectives or mysteries, you actually have to solve them for yourself and become the detective. Your environment matters, and this is everything from noise to the lighting in the room, the temperature, coffee that you're drinking. These small details can really affect your flow. If you're struggling to write, it might not just be writer's block, it could be your environment, and we've done a couple of videos on writer's blocks. I'll link to those down below. Most new writers think that you draft something once, maybe twice, and then you call it a day. But let's talk about the hidden drafts, as I like to refer to them. These are the versions of your story that exist only in brainstorming sessions or in your head, or, maybe you've scrawled them on a little notebook or a pad somewhere, right? And this can be broken down into pre-draft outlining. So this is even before you type chapter 1, you have maybe outlined your plot, or you've discovered some gaping plot holes and you've reworked an entire story. That would be going back to draft 0. And although I know some people skip formal outlines and they just write freely, pantser like Stephen King, but even then you still have to mentally construct these frameworks, and I would count these as hidden drafts. Then come the mid-draft realization. So you might get halfway through your manuscript and suddenly realize that your main character's motivation just doesn't hold up anymore. It's not as powerful as you thought it was. So then you go back and you fix that. Well, there's another hidden draft. And each time you fundamentally change the story in your mind, you are creating a new version. So cut yourself some slack when you feel like you're just constantly rewriting. It's all going towards that ultimate product. I want you to also think about this concept of revision versus revision, right? So the word revision literally means revision, which means to see your story from a new perspective. It's not just about fixing typos, it's about potentially rethinking what you've written. And I always encourage authors and writers to embrace this process instead of dreading it. I hear a lot of people say they dread this, but this is really where the magic happens. This is where you can shape something into an incredible manuscript. Character alchemy is the next thing we need to talk about. You've all heard that characters need flaws, they need goals, they need obstacles. That's common knowledge. But real characters, they have a certain alchemy that transcends this neat little list of traits. Internal contradictions is one. Do you ever feel conflicted about something in your own life? Maybe you hate confrontation, but at the same time you just can't stand injustice. That's a contradiction, and it's exactly what makes real people. And of course, that makes great characters compelling when you inject that real element that a human being would have. You need to give them these internal tug-of-war moments because they'll come alive on the page. You also need to think about dynamic relationships. Don't just label characters as best friend, rival, or the love interest. Ask how these relationships evolve. People grow, friendships will end up souring and people fall out. Rivals might, in the long run, become friends as people's goals align over time. This evolution is going to propel your plot forward in really surprising ways. And it'll be so much more interesting than just static, predictable relationships. The other one that I like to mention is unspoken desires. Characters should have conscious goals like saving the kingdom or trying to land a new job, whatever it may be, but they should also have hidden desires that they don't admit, even to themselves. And that internal conflict is catnip for readers, right? It makes us want to know more about these hidden desires. Here's another one, is the secret to good pacing. Now this one, please pay attention to. It's not just about speed, but pacing is one of the biggest mistakes we see in manuscripts, one of the biggest problems. Usually it's simplified to don't bore your readers are getting bored. But pacing is a lot more nuanced than just fast, slow, and boring. One of the keys to pacing is variety. If your story is constantly moving really fast all the time, well then intensity is going to lose its impact. But if it's going too slow, then of course readers will get bored. And so the secret here is you need to alternate between calm and chaos, right? Going fast and slow. Variation will be exciting to readers. The other way I would think about this is as if your writing is like music. You have to have that quiet tension in between, this up and down. The other element you can play with when it comes to pacing are scene lengths and transition. Short, punchy scenes can, of course, heighten tension. Longer, more detailed scenes could deepen emotional resonance. What you want to do is use those wisely, and the same applies to transitions. A sudden jump can create a jolt of excitement, but a slow fade might let the reader catch their breath. So ultimately, you need to know which to use at the right time. This is often why a professional editor really steps in at this point to help with it. Then you want to think about micro-pacing. Think about the pace within the scenes, the sentence structure, the paragraph breaks, the dialogue, description. This, as I term it, micro-level pacing, right? More direct, smaller pacing. That's also going to dramatically affect how readers experience each moment. And this is something that most people never talk about when they talk about refining manuscripts. Now, I also want to talk about the real power of voice. Writers often scramble for a unique voice, but voice is more than just quirky word choices or stylized prose. Really, it comes down to authenticity. Readers can smell if you're being fake from a mile away, if you're forcing fancy language that doesn't resonate with the story's tone, or it's not you. Let your natural storytelling shine through, because that's really when a voice in a manuscript feels real, it feels more magnetic. And often people come to us because they're worried about how it is their own voice, and they say, well, that's how I talk, and I know it's not, exactly how it should be, but using that is going to make your writing stand out and make it different from everything else. Layered perspectives is another one that I don't hear people talk about. Each character's internal voice should differ from your narrative voice. Let them use slang or have a very unique worldview or potentially interpret events very differently, because this interplay of voices is going to enrich the overall style of your writing and of course of the book that you're creating. Now, another one that people never talk about is revision myth. I alluded to this a little bit earlier in the video, but revision isn't just about correcting mistakes. It's a chance to transform your story. Kill your darlings is a big one that we hear, particularly if you've followed writing advice from Stephen King. Writers often repeat this mantra. What it means is to cut out your beloved but unnecessary passages. But the real trick with this is understanding why they're not working, because sometimes a darling can be saved just with a different angle. And then over editing is another one because it can really flatten your voice. You absolutely want clarity, you want to polish it, but if you revise too aggressively, you risk losing what is making your writing unique. You need to find a balance. And I always say you just want to refine, but be very careful not to scrub away all of your personality. It's also really important to get outside perspectives. And I would say it's 50-50 on this. So some writers do this really well and others neglect it entirely. You need critique partners, beta readers, and most importantly, professional editors. They will help you find all the blind spots that you'll simply never catch alone. Because remember, it's your story, and of course accept and reject feedback based on your vision, but allow this feedback and really sit and think about the feedback for some time. Often with feedback and critiques on our writing, there can be this very visceral reaction where we just immediately go, I don't agree with that. That's wrong. That's not what I meant there. Or at least for me sometimes. But once you sit and you think about it, I would always say sit with the feedback for at least a couple of days, if not longer. And then when you come back to the feedback, you'll probably look at it with a fresh pair of eyes and say, you are absolutely spot on. I will make that change. Now, the $1 million question, what makes writing truly good? Is it poetic language, a gripping plot, or is it something else entirely? Well, one of the absolute keys or fundamentals is connection. Good writing will make you feel something. That could be anything from excitement, fear, empathy, heartbreak. If you're connecting with readers on an emotional level, then you are winning. The other thing you need in your writing is a clear sense of purpose. Whether you're writing genre fiction or a literary epic, you need to have a reason behind each scene. So really show the readers why they should care about the stakes or the characters' struggles. And the other thing I would urge you to think about is sincerity over perfection. Sometimes a slightly messy story with a beating heart resonates more than a pristinely structured story with no soul. I can give a really good example of this. We helped to publish an author called Chris Donaldson. He's one of the success stories on our website. And he was very resistant to editorial feedback. And initially, when we were given this feedback, we were quite confused by why he didn't want to take it on board. He was paying for a professional editor, and of course, he took some of the feedback on board. A lot changed, but there was quite a lot that he didn't want to, was quite resistant to. And because of that, he managed to keep the soul within his story. There is this perfect balance to be struck between you must have editorial feedback, beta readers, critique on your work. You need those external views and opinions to refine it. And often it'll be because there's elements that could be improved, better explanations, etc. Never let it go so far as that it completely removes your soul from your work. Hopefully that has given you a lot of things that you probably didn't know about your writing, or at least I hope a handful of insights that goes beyond the usual advice that we hear on writing. I'd love to hear in the comments down below which of those you will be using, which were completely new to you, or any that maybe you'd heard before but now you have a better understanding of. YouTube will also now be recommending another one of my value-packed videos right here, so go ahead and watch that one next.